Hello and welcome to the South East Rivers Trust new series of webinars, The Story of Rivers. The South East Rivers Trust is a grassroots environmental charity dedicated to preserving and improving river ecosystems across the southeast of England. Your presenting team today is myself, Jess, and Polly, and we'll be sharing the series via our CERT River Club Facebook group and also our YouTube channel. So if you haven't already joined, head over there now and see what you've missed so far. So I'm Jess. I've worked for the Trust for a couple of years and I do a lot of the volunteering events, citizen science initiatives, and also a lot of our community outreach.
And I'm Polly Penn. I've worked at the Trust for over 5 years and I oversee education and engagement for the Trust.
So today we're going to talk to you a bit about the problem of sewage in rivers, or Poo-lution. We'll cover the scale of the problem and how this nasty stuff makes its way into our rivers. And then we'll cover some of the ways you at home and us as a trust can help improve the situation. If you have any questions at any point during the webinar or afterwards, then you can post them in the comment section below. This will help us to know what to include in future webinars, and we can also do some question and answer sessions with some of our staff. So, sewage in rivers? Surely not, I hear you cry. The problem was at its worst in Victorian London during the Great Stink of 1858, when the Thames was basically an open sewer and the very hot summer made the smell unbearable. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert attempted to take a pleasure cruise on the Thames, but returned to shore within a few minutes because the smell was so terrible. The situation was certainly improved in London with the building of the world-famous sewer system, and that had a massive benefit on human health and also for the river. However, that certainly isn't the end of the story, and there are many ways our rivers all across the country, both in urban areas and rural areas, and there's still a lot of ways that they're negatively impacted by the addition of human sewage.
So how does sewage even get into our rivers? Well, to explain that, we first need to remember what our sewage infrastructure is and what pipes are running beneath our feet. Broadly speaking, there are 3 types of drainage: surface water sewage, foul sewer, and the combined sewer. To explain these, there's this useful diagram from Connect Right. So on the right-hand side, you can see the green pipes. That's the foul sewer, and it's collecting all the wastewater from your home and taking it to the sewage treatment works. On the left, you can see the surface water. That is draining the rainwater from your roofs, driveways, roads and pavements, and taking it straight to the local river. Obviously, that is less than ideal, as water from our roads is by no means clean, but we've got another webinar focused on that topic coming up later. The final type of sewer is the combined sewer, and this takes all of the surface water and all of the foul water collected into the same pipe, and all of it is transported to the sewage treatment works. This is more commonly found in areas with an older sewage infrastructure, such as London. So this map on the right shows London by the type of sewer. So the light blue is the combined and the green is the separate. So you can see that the combined is in the centre where more of the old infrastructure is. So as I said, the combined sewer is designed to take everything, so rainwater, foul sewage, all of it, which means that local sewage treatment works can become overwhelmed in times of heavy rainfall, because if you imagine all of the sewage plus all of that rainwater and stormwater going into the pipes, and this is the first route of how sewage can enter our rivers. And it is combined sewer overflows. So the image on the left shows the combined sewer in dry, sunny weather, collecting foul sewage and taking it to the sewage treatment works. However, on the right, you can see that the combined sewer is taking foul sewage, but also collecting all of the rainwater from roofs, driveways, and pavements. And that is causing the pipe to completely fill up and transfer a huge load to the sewage treatment works. And as I said, sewage treatment works are only built to cope with so much, so they can become overwhelmed in high rainfall. And this is what a combined sewer overflow is. It is a fail-safe. So instead of that sewage backing up into our homes, it is instead discharged into the river. But sadly, that is obviously putting sewage into our rivers. And here is a video of a type of sewer overflow. So this one in particular is actually attached to a storm tank. Storm tanks are a temporary store of excess sewage and stormwater that some water companies have within their infrastructure. And you know, if they can, they then take that water out of the storm tank and treat it. But again, if these tanks fill to the brim, they will discharge into the river instead of backing up into people's homes. This particular tank is on the Hogsmill, which is a chalk stream in South London. So it's quite a shocking image when you bear in mind that that's a chalk stream and how little flow would be going down there normally. And many homes aren't even connected to the main sewer infrastructure. So over 1 million homes in England and Wales are not connected to main sewerage, as I just described. In many rural areas, it's processed with septic tanks attached to individual homes or at small package treatment works for a cluster of homes. There are so many different types of both of these, which I won't go into because there's too much detail for one webinar, but some do connect straight to a local river, and therefore if they're not being maintained properly, they are probably discharging sewage into our river systems. So back to main sewerage, the third type of way sewage is getting into our rivers is through misconnected plumbing. So again, this is the typical separate sewer system with foul on one side and surface on the other. However, in some cases, after some DIY or a plumber that's not properly trained, the plumbing can go wrong and the appliances can be plumbed into the wrong system. So this diagram here shows someone's washing machine, toilet or sink being plumbed into the surface water instead. And that essentially means that you are having a bath or going to the loo straight into your local river. While it's a funny image, it is a widespread problem and it is serious. Across the UK, it's estimated there are 500,000 homes at least that are misconnected, and I personally think it's probably much higher. And in London, between 1% and 5% of homes are misconnected in this way, all polluting the local river. If you're out and about on a river, you might be able to spot signs that there's a misconnected drain nearby. So these photos on the left show the outfalls, the surface water outfalls, they're discharging into the river. And you can see that they're showing signs of sewage pollution. So the most obvious sign is sewage fungus. And that's like a fluffy grey slime that can coat the edge of the outfall, but also the bottom of the river. You could also look out for grey or milky discoloured water or a foamy scum and bad smells. That can all indicate that. And sometimes you might even smell the river and it might smell fresh like fabric conditioner, and that's obviously a washing machine that's been misconnected. So you can always look out for those and report them yourself, which we'll tell you how to do later. So the final way that sewage can get into our rivers is through blocked pipes. I'm sure all of you have heard of the fatbergs. So pipes get blocked when the congealed fats that we put down the sink get stuck together with other unflushables, such as wet wipes or sanitary towels. And these get stuck together and form huge hard rocks, which we call fatbergs. They're a big problem. There was a 40-ton fatberg the size of a double-decker bus removed from a London sewer last year. So if you imagine these fatbergs are blocking the pipes, the sewage has to go somewhere, and so it usually then backs up in the system and bursts out through a manhole like the picture in the middle, or backs up into people's homes, which is really nasty. So once sewage is out of the pipes, it can then go anywhere, and it can run straight down roads and back into the surface water drainage system, which then flows into our rivers. So sadly, it's another way that sewage can enter our rivers.
So why does it matter that we have sewage going into our rivers? It has implications for both us and for wildlife, but from the human health point of view, cholera used to be a huge problem back in pre-sewer London, with large outbreaks of the disease being fairly frequent. This is because bacteria from people who were getting sick was getting back into the water supply and contaminating it. Luckily, cholera, not such a big problem now. However, in 2007, tests conducted in the Thames after heavy rainfall confirmed high levels of bacteria and viruses which could cause gastroenteritis and other infections. There's been several high-profile cases of people getting sick after swimming in UK rivers. Public Health England investigated an outbreak of illness amongst participants in the Hampton Court swim in 2012. More than out of 700 people that were surveyed, 338 reported symptoms, including diarrhea, stomach cramps, and vomiting. And this was a similar problem that the comedian David Walliams had when he swam along the Thames to raise money for sports relief a few years back. His Thames tummy had very similar symptoms to what I just described, which really upped the difficulty of his 140-mile swim. But it's not just swimmers, it can affect any water users. And rowers have reported stomach bugs, eye infections, and cases of blood poisoning, with rowers that are new to the area or new to rowing being particularly prone to getting ill, as they are yet to build up any immunity to these bugs. And although there are quite a few nasty diseases that you can end up contracting after swimming in rivers, including Weil's disease, sewage pollution certainly contributes significantly to this. So the problems are a little different for wildlife. If we see sewage essentially as an organic input of food for bacteria, then this is the usual balanced cycle that we observe in a healthy river free of contamination. So we've got organic food and oxygen feeding a population of bacteria that's producing carbon dioxide. And then this carbon dioxide that's produced is then absorbed by algae growing in the river or plants. And that is then turning that carbon dioxide into oxygen, which is then goes back into the cycle and gets used up by the bacteria. So it's all in balance, all nicely in proportion. However, if we increase the levels of organic input, then this means that the bacteria multiply rapidly to respond to that. And that means that they're then producing much more carbon dioxide because there's more of them. And unfortunately, because the algae and plants can't respond as quickly and they're much slower growing, they can't absorb all of that carbon dioxide, and they're just producing the same amount of oxygen, but it's being used up much quicker by the bacteria. And this ends up with something called an oxygen deficit. And when we have these low levels of oxygen in the water, this is basically causing suffocation for all the animals there. So this is for invertebrates, so all the tiny little critters that are living in the river, as well as larger animals like fish. And if you see fish at the surface gasping, like in this picture, you can see that they're in distress. They're basically gasping for air. And if you see this on a river, then it basically means that oxygen levels are dangerously low, and this needs to be reported very quickly to avoid mass death of fish.
So now you know the main different ways that sewage can enter our rivers and the impacts that that's having both on the wildlife that live there, but also us and how we use them. I'm sure the question that's on all of your minds as well, how much sewage is there? And that's actually a really hard question for us to answer, mainly because there's just not the level of monitoring that we need to really quantify this problem. But while we can't give you a figure on the sewage in your local river, we can help you give an idea of just how widespread the problem is. So analysis done by the World Wildlife Fund found that 40% of rivers in England and Wales are polluted with sewage. And I personally think, and the Trust as well, think that that's probably actually much higher in reality, just because of the low monitoring on rivers, which, if it exists, is sparse and sporadic. So where is this sewage coming from? Well, we've already explained what a combined sewer overflow is, and there's an estimated 18,000 of these across England and Wales. 90% of these are discharging raw sewage mixed with stormwater directly into rivers. And the World Wildlife Fund found that between 8 and 14% of these overflows are spilling sewage into rivers at least once a week, and between a third and a half at least once a month. So given they're only supposed to be discharging in extreme rainfall events, these discharges are clearly getting more frequently as the sewage system can't cope. So in terms of misconnections, it's estimated there are 500,000 homes across the UK with some sort of misconnection. And again, I think that's much higher. And this is all adding sewage to our rivers. More closely to home, the Zoological Society of London has supported us in assessing polluted outfalls. In London using outfall safari, which we'll explain later. And they estimate that across the 600-kilometre length of rivers and streams in London, not including the main Thames, there's an estimated 1,500 polluting outfalls. And then on top of that, there's 1 million homes that aren't connected to main sewage, and the majority of these, like I said, are septic tanks or packaged treatment works. And if they're not maintained correctly and they're plumbed into the river, then they would also be contributing sewage. these aren't, there's no legislation that requires some of these to even be registered. So whether or not they're in good condition or not, we just don't know. And then on top of all of that are other pollution incidents. So that could include the accidental release of sewage into rivers from treatment works. It could include the blocked sewers that we talked about overflowing into rivers across the land, and the list goes on. So while I can't give you a figure on how much sewage is in your river, I hope you can see that it's a much more widespread problem than you might have expected. And it's certainly enough to be having a negative impact on the wildlife and also how we use rivers themselves. So, what are we doing about it? That is the question. So the Trust, first of all, really wants to understand just how bad this problem is and, you know, what the biggest contributors are. So as an example of how we're doing this, we have 2 citizen science programs. We have Riverfly, and this is where volunteers take monthly samples of the invertebrates living in our rivers, and depending on which invertebrates are present, you can get an idea of how polluted that water is. So this survey really helps us identify hotspots where we need to investigate further. And then, as I've mentioned, we also have outfall safaris. So these were designed by ZSL, Zoological Society of London, and they're a method to systematically check all the outfall pipes that lead into a river for evidence of misconnections. And we've done a few of these now with our volunteers, where they go out, they walk along the banks of the river, take pictures, assess how polluted they are, and this information all helps us target where we're going to be contacting people for rectification. So all of this data we then use in partnership with organisations like the Environment Agency and water companies. We do this through our catchment partnerships. Catchment partnerships are where we bring together different organisations with an interest in the river or who might have influence over it, and we look at all the data, understand what's going on, what the issues are, and how each of the organisations can help work together to deliver solutions. And obviously addressing pollution is one that we often talk about in these settings. Another example of partnership working specifically are the creation of drainage and wastewater management plans. And this might sound very boring, but I am personally very, very excited about these. So drainage wastewater management plans aim to bring together all of the people to plan further ahead when it comes to drainage and wastewater management, and aim to work at ways that they can deliver multiple benefits for a range of different organisations, all with different responsibility. So a good example is a wetland. We could construct a wetland intercepting a surface water pipe to clean the water, reduce the amount that's overloading the system, which in theory would then reduce the amount that combined sewer overflows are having to be used. It would also help reduce flooding locally, and it would be a green space for local people. So you can see how one project could deliver a range of services for a range of different organisations, and that's really what these plans will be about. They're in the very early stages at the moment, but at some point there will be the opportunity for public consultation, and when there is, I'll make sure you know about it.
So we've just covered some of the things that we as a trust are doing to combat the problem, but there are lots of things that you can do at home as well to improve the situation. So one of the main things we can all do at home is make sure we're using our drainage responsibly. So the first way to do this is only flush the 3 Ps, which are pee, poo and paper. Anything else contributes towards blockages in the system. Some wet wipes are labelled as flushable, but all water companies are in agreement that they really shouldn't be flushed, because toilet roll is specifically designed so that once it's flushed, it breaks down really easily and disintegrates in the water, whereas wet wipes don't do that and they stay intact and are much more likely to cause blockage in the pipe. So everything apart from the 3 Ps should be binned. So Thames Water have reported that there's been about a 20% rise across their area in blockages from people flushing these unflushables, things like wet wipes, sanitary towels and things like that. So please remember that during lockdown, while we're all at home, please remember only flush the 3 Ps, and otherwise we could see more blockages in our pipes, backing up and overflowing, which is not only disgusting but also terrible for wildlife. We should also avoid pouring fats and oils down the drains because these solidify and coat the inside of the pipe, reducing its diameter or can cause full blockages. And running hot or boiling water down the plug afterwards doesn't really work because the water cools rapidly anyway and the fat still solidifies in the pipe. So the best thing you can do is let the fat cool down in the pan and then pour it into a container and either bin it or reuse it. So we've talked a lot about what a misconnection is, but obviously there's a chance that we could have misconnections at home. So making sure that we check this is definitely an important thing to do. So the first thing you could do is basically figure out what kind of drainage your house is connected to. Is it that separate system or is it a combined system? And you can do this by giving your water company a call, or you might already know it. So if you're in an area with separate drainage systems, then this could be a problem for you. You could be misconnected. So things that you can look out for are basically pipes from appliances that end up connecting into your gutter downpipes or drains at the bottom of your gutters. So it's a really easy way to spot that, whether you know, to see if you might be misconnected. And for more information and tips on whether you might be misconnected or what to look out for, you can head over to the connectright.org.uk website. And they've also got lots of details of local water safe plumbers that will know about the issue. So more and more people are paving over their gardens and their driveways, adding to the amount of impermeable surfaces covering the land. In areas where there's a combined sewer network, this is a real problem because more water is then running off the surface of the land into the combined sewer network rather than just infiltrating into the ground. And because then we've got more rainwater going into the system, it's more likely to become overwhelmed. And this adds to the likelihood of those combined sewer overflows discharging into our rivers. So if we depave some of our garden, if we renaturalise some of the surfaces, this allows infiltration of the water into the ground. So things like grass or flower beds, rain gardens, all will help that infiltration rate and reduce the pressure on the combined sewer system. But it'll also provide more resources for wildlife and help recharge groundwater reserves. So it's a win-win situation all round for the environment. So the final thing you can do is make sure that you report any pollution that you see. So any of those things that we talked about before, sewage fungus or smelly discoloured water, things like that, can be called into the Environment Agency 24-hour hotline. So this is you know, any time of day, 7 days a week, you can call this number and someone will be there to take details of the incident. So to help them out, because they're not actually based locally, get a really good description of where you are, so nearest postcode, road names, things like that. And have a look at how much pollution is there. So how much of the river, you know, how far downstream does the pollution go? Is it the whole river width that's affected or just a small strip? And things like that can really help them to effectively respond to the incident. If there's wildlife in distress, like those gasping fish that I talked about earlier, then please let them know that as well, because that requires a really urgent response. And to help them see for themselves what's there, take as many photos as you can. So just one last reminder that if there's anything more you'd like to know about the subjects we've covered, then please leave your comments or questions below. Next week, in the run-up to World Fish Migration Day, we'll be giving you a double whammy with 2 webinars in 1 week, all about fish passage. Part 1 will cover why fish need to be free to move around in a river and the problems that weirs can cause, and Part 2 will focus on the solutions we can put in place to overcome barriers to fish movement. So I hope you've all enjoyed this week's episode of The Story of Rivers, and we'll see you again next week.